I'm Pam, and I'm here to talk about video games. Today I'm talking about a much anticipated sequel to a game I really loved. It's Grime 2. Grime 2 was developed by Cloverbyte and released on March 31st for PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. I played and recorded this on an Xbox Series X with a code provided by the publisher. Grime 2 is a metroidvania where you play a kind of mimic, a stealer of forms, making your way through an unsettling and surreal world that is obsessed with both creating and consuming art. Grime 2 has an expansive and complicated combat system with bosses and even minor enemies that can provide a real challenge. It also has significantly more difficult platforming than the first game. The game feels similar to its predecessor, but has enough new abilities and tweaks to the formula to make it stand on its own. Like Grime 1, this game throws a ton of new proper nouns at you, rather than use more typical gaming terminology, which can take some time to wrap your head around. Checkpoints are surrogates. This is where you rest, level up, and can fast travel to and from. You heal with breath, something that you obtain from defeating enemies or absorbing it from them. Grime 2's force meter functions differently than it did in the first game, where it was basically a stamina bar. While attacking and dashing will drain this meter, it never limits you. Rather, if you keep your force above a certain point, your attacks will be more powerful. This is a change I really enjoyed. It's much more fun to be rewarded for properly managing force rather than be punished for not. Rather than have consumable items to augment combat, Grime 2 features molds, which are powered by paint, the game's equivalent of mana. When you're fighting an enemy, they will at some point start glowing green. If you dash into them, you will absorb their mold ward, allowing you to turn into that enemy and use their ability. This is a one-time use thing, however, once you've absorbed the mold ward from an enemy type a certain number of times, it will become a permanent ability. In addition to the molds that allow you to turn into an enemy, there are also item molds which you can find throughout the world. These are basically spells which you can cast a certain number of times before you need to refresh them at a surrogate. You can find upgrades for each item mold, increasing the number of times you can cast them and how powerful they are. You have 3 slots to equip your choice of mold wards and item molds, and the 4th slot is reserved for the single-use absorbed molds. Grime 1's absorb mechanic has been replaced with a more typical parry. Whereas absorb was frequently a fight ending, or at least phase ending ability, something you needed to use at particular times and were heavily rewarded for doing so, parry feels like just another fight option that only staggered enemies, and I usually found myself just dodging instead. Grime 2 also features a ton of different weapons and armor sets, which all have a big impact on how combat feels. Changing your armor changes your appearance, which I love. When it comes to weapons, there are quick blades, ultra-slow but strong maces, more well-rounded melee options, and various ranged weapons. Some cause debuffs or have extra damaging effects. There are tons of options to play with, though I'm not that into gear, and I found the weapon I started with was the one I liked using best. Each weapon also has a special attack that you charge up by using normal attacks. My axe sent a spinning version of itself out which persisted, doing damage to anything that touched it for a few seconds. It was a nice ability, though it is also very susceptible to interruption by enemy attacks or player movement, which would eat the charge without doing the ability. If you're someone who likes playing with gear and builds to optimize and find ways of being OP, you'll probably have more fun with combat than I did. Combat in Grime 2 is a complex dance which offers you a ton of options, and to be honest, sometimes it was a little too complex for me. Bosses are impressive and vary wildly in appearance and abilities. On any given fight, there will be enemy attacks you can parry, dodge, dash counter, or grasp counter. Attacks that can be dash or grasp countered are indicated by colored circles around the enemy, while parry timing you just need to figure out yourself. As you fight, you can do melee or ranged attacks, use your mold wards and item molds. You need to manage debuffs and your paint and force levels. I found Grime 1 to be a difficult game, and I found Grime 2 got even more difficult more quickly. Bosses could easily two-shot you and frequently utilized incredibly far-ranging attacks or just turned the entire floor into spikes. It was easy to get overwhelmed in fights that included multiple enemies, all of which shot projectiles in an incredibly accurate manner. There were a number of attacks that weren't obvious, to me at least, how you were supposed to avoid them. While I found the bosses in the first act of the game very rewarding, I found many of the mid to late game ones were a little too much for me. Even normal enemies as you explore can often dole out and take an incredible amount of damage and often appear in packs. One ability I enjoyed was the death mark. When you're killed by an enemy, it will be marked. If you return to fight it and you parry or counter it, it will push out an image of your corpse and grasping it will heal you. I'm also happy to say that Grime 2 has no dumb mechanics that make you drop things when you die. I also really liked that I could push enemies into spikes or pull out the platforms they were standing on and make them fall to their deaths. Unlike Grime 1, Grime 2 does have difficulty options. There are multipliers for how much damage you take, as well as how much damage the enemies take, and I started making use of these around the halfway point. There are many ways to get stronger in the game. You get experience points throughout the world, which you can use to level up 5 different stats. There's health, as well as 4 different stats that strengthen different types of weapons or molds, or even your parries. There are hunt points you gain from defeating certain enemies, and these can be spent on talents. The talent tree, in general, works to improve either your parries, dodges, or molds. You can find upgrades to increase your breath, force, and paint capacity, while new movement abilities generally come from bosses. There are also upgrade systems for your weapons, armor, and breath crowns. You can use materials you find out in the world, or purchase them from vendors to upgrade these. One of the little details I most enjoyed was being able to grasp crafting materials that you'd see in the backgrounds. This game has way more platforming than the first game did, and as a fan of platforming, I liked that. These sections are complicated and thrilling when they're working as expected. Unfortunately, they're not always working and can be a little janky. A lot of the platforming revolves around using dash on green things. Curiously, this is the one very key ability which never seems to get a tutorial. Everything else is pretty clearly explained when you get access to it, but not this. The most interesting sections have you grasping onto hooks to pull yourself forward, or grasping spiked objects to move or destroy them. You're dodging through obstacles that can hurt you and making platforms appear with dash jump. Later, you'll get access to a dash slide, which allows you to move along walls, making you invulnerable to damage. I found this ability quite temperamental. It didn't always work. Similarly, when it came to the green orbs that you use dash jump on, sometimes they seemed to pull me in from rather far away, while at other times they didn't trigger despite me being right on top of them. While grasping was always responsive and extremely fun to use, some abilities didn't feel as good. Double jump is a staple in this genre, and Grime 2 doesn't have one. Instead, it has 2 different abilities which sort of act as replacements, but I don't really like the feel of either of them. Burst jump requires that you hold up to charge it in order to jump higher. The charge period brings any kind of flow to a halt and makes it difficult to use in combat. Hand jump, a very late game ability, allows you to jump again in the air, but only if you're close to the ground. You're often tasked with using this over long pits of spikes or ground that enemies have set on fire. If you have ground beneath you, you can hand jump indefinitely, but if you miss time and try to jump again when you're a little too far from the ground, you're fucked. I'm also not really a fan of the wall climb in this game. You can use it to jump up a single wall, but you need to jump then air dash into the wall over and over, and it feels kinda awkward and time consuming. This is such a mechanically dense game that I can't believe I'm only just getting to exploration, which is my favorite part of Metroidvanias. Exploration could be rewarding in some areas, but was very frustrating in others. Some areas of Grime feel great, well thought out maps with lots of shortcuts and things to find. In the first and third acts of the game, the way you make your way to your objective is fairly linear, but each area itself is winding and packed with items. Early on, there will be paths you clearly don't have the ability to access yet, and you will be able to mark to explore later. The map accurately reveals the world's structure, but you need to unlock seals in each area in order to see it. When you find the first seal, you'll be able to start mapping, and when you find the second, you'll be able to fast travel from any surrogates in the area. Having to find the seal to see the map sucks, especially around the mid-game where things become much less linear. At one point, I had fairly thoroughly explored 3 different zones, even defeated bosses in them, but had yet to find the seal for any of them. There was just a big black void in the middle of my map. There are strands that flow from surrogates to seals, but following them would just bring me to a wall that had to be broken down from the opposite side. I felt like I was being led into areas that I really had no business being in yet, or at least being allowed through the wrong path that would never bring me to a seal. It was very frustrating to not be able to see what I had or hadn't explored. The mid-game also featured too many times when I'd find myself running down a long, rather empty pathway, only to find a dead-end wall that had to be broken from the other side, and then be forced to run all the way back. The visuals are surreal, often stunning, and the soundtrack is very good. I love the way it uses body parts as the themes for areas. There are hands everywhere, unsettling places themed entirely around fingernails. I also really liked the areas that looked a little less organic. The Porcelain Palace at Can is gorgeous and has some really cool monster designs. Paint Reef has dripping paint everywhere and is incredibly colorful, while later areas make it look like you're in space. I was always excited to see what the next area would look like. I did find some of the indoor areas incredibly dark though. The backgrounds were beautifully lit, while my character and the foreground seemed to be missing lighting effects that made it hard to make out what was happening. Lighting also frequently just behaved oddly. Some of my footage may look blown out because I had to turn the brightness way up in order to have a chance of seeing in some areas. So here's some more context for this review. I loved Grime 1, but it's a game that I did not play at release. I played it about a year and a half later after many patches, DLC release, and a port to consoles. After finishing Grime 2, I wish I had waited longer to play it. I got a review key early, the game performs just fine on PC, but I am on my PC every day, all day for work, and that's not where I want to play games. So I tried it on the Steam Deck, but I found that the graphic quality as well as performance were way worse, and the movement was kind of choppy in a way that made it feel not so great. Then it was announced that the game was going to be releasing on consoles the same day as PC, so I got an Xbox review key. I found the performance much better on Xbox, but there was one key feature missing. For some reason, only on Xbox, there was no dedicated map button. I'm a compulsive map checker, and every time I had to press 3 buttons to open the map, my desire to play the game just diminished. So I decided to stop playing and wait until I could open the map with 1 button, which happened a few days after the game officially released. I played most of the game in the 2 weeks after it officially released, and I don't think it's fully baked. There are lots of bugs. Some movement abilities can't be counted on, there's lag when you rest at a surrogate before you can exit out or travel. The return to checkpoint command only works sometimes and didn't work when I got stuck in the terrain. A loading icon will frequently pop up on screen, sometimes the map doesn't display properly. Enemy hitboxes and hitboxes for spikes can be real wonky. I've been respawned in spikes after failing a platforming segment. I've had an objective marker stuck on my map for the whole game. I know the team has been working hard on patches. There have been 3 major patches released in just a few weeks, though I think only 1 had hit consoles by the time I finished the game. It's great that they're making improvements, but at the same time, I really wish the game that was sent out for review and released was much more polished. I ended up finishing Grime 2 in 22 hours. I didn't see a completion percentage, but I'm sure there's still a fair amount of things I didn't do. So I feel like I'm in a weird spot with this review. Frequent patches have been happening that are not only fixing bugs, but also impacting how the game plays and works, and I expect that there will be many more patches to come. But I can only tell you my opinions based on my experience when I played it, and that experience wasn't great. I think that in 6 months, Grime 2 is going to be quite different and probably a much better experience. But for now, the technical issues and the frustrations I found really put a damper on the things that I did enjoy about it. If you want to see more, check out my review of the first Grime. I'm much more positive about that one. I have a Patreon, or you can become a channel member if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.